All right, so we're going to create a textured surface to paint on. And canvas is great to start on too, because it's got a bit of a texture or a tooth to kind of grab onto. So we're going to use something called modeling paste. And this one's easy. That's kind of just a squeeze tube. You can also buy them in containers like that. And normally what I would do, I'd either have a primed canvas like you've got here, right, pre-primed, or you could use some gesso first. So I've just got this piece of cardboard. I should really gesso it first, but I don't want to, I didn't prepare it, so I'm just going to go for it. And it doesn't necessarily matter. It's just that if any of the boards is poking out uncovered, it'll accept acrylic paint differently. And if I were to use oil, I shouldn't be getting oil on cardboard, because the oil eventually will break down like canvas or papers. That's why we have to put the gesso on it. We have to protect the fibers. Well, this is really smooth stuff, eh? Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a gesso, but it's really thick. Okay. So what we can do, and some you can have a little bit of grit in them, or you can add grit. You could buy like a pumice sand to add to it, or just regular sand even. So there's different companies that make it, that some have it a little bit more tacky, but it's really nice and tacky, so you can make textures really easily, right? So like you can use your palette. Oh, sorry, I'm using your palette then. Your lovely new, it's a nice one. I like it. I'll use my dirty one here. So you can make nice textures. So the first thing you might want to do is to create just a basic ground first, right? So where maybe you want some texture. You see how easily, you see how if you drag the tool, and so once you're putting it on, you maybe want to just try some different techniques, like you can rub it on real smooth. You can play with what angle your tool is running at to see what kind of mark it makes, so that, you know, flat, slight angle, completely flat but really light, it leaves different drag marks. So it's something that you can play with a bit. So, and sometimes I just use good quality gessos to do this too, but this one sets up a little quicker and it's got more body to it, so that you can sculpt it a little bit, right? So you see, you get some interesting textures, right? You see that? So, you know, when you're thinking about the snake that you want to do, get your board sort of covered in general first. And maybe, you know, think about, oh, what kind of background texture would I like? Do I want it super smooth? Because you could make it really smooth if you want. Or do I want some subtle, you know, marks in the background or not? And then when it comes to the snake, you can basically sort of draw with your palette knife. And there's all different shapes and sizes of palette knives too, and you might want to play with like this one maybe, right? And you might want to say, what if I just let myself play a bit with, because you got this sort of sushi thing of the snake, right? And you see how this is so malleable. I have to give you some money for your your modeling phase there, demo. So you see, because you could play with, what's the right shape that I want? What's my composition that I want? And then if there's something you don't like, you just flatten it back out. So it's a kind of a way you can be very intuitive, because I know that you like to be kind of intuitive as an artist some of the time, right?
Can you do it really 3D?
Yeah, and so then you can also make it super 3D, so that I would first start by, let's figure out the composition, right? And then you can make it much deeper. You'll find that different companies have different consistency to their modeling paste. This one's pretty fine. A lot of them are stiffer than this one. But one of the neat things about acrylics is as they sit out, they get stiffer. So that you may even say, you know, I want to let some of it sit out. So get a little extra out. Keep it not in a big hump. Have it where it can start to set up a bit and let it get a little stiff, because this one's it's a little bit thinner. Some of them are much thicker, and some of them have a bit of grit or more texture to them. So the only way to know which one's like what, you either ask at the art store if they really know their stuff, or you just try it and you find the one you like, right? But and so once you have something down, you can also see that once it sets up, do you see if you drag over it lightly, you start to get some interesting textures, and you can play around with, how do I get, like I noticed when a few minutes ago that I dragged over and went, well, that looks like snakeskin, cool, because that's something that you're wanting, right? And then I'd have to figure out, how could I replicate that as one possibility. You can try different tools to see, what if I use this tool, what will I get if I use this palette knife instead. So I'm just gonna and you can try different textures and different angles, right, to get your drawing. So you see how you can leave a pretty good bump there, enough that when you put paint over that, it's going to look even bigger, more, right? So, and if we let this stiffen up and set up a bit, it's going to give, you know, a little more. So it's pretty low relief stuff. Now we should have a look at how heavy this heavy gel is too, because maybe this stuff will be stiffer than this one. Now this is a clear gel, where this is white. So modeling paste is basically like a thick gesso, right? But this one's, I think, even thicker, right? So this you can mix with your paint, but you could also mix it with, you know, gesso, if you want it to have a white rather than a clear. Or you might say, hey, I think clear is kind of cool. Maybe I want to work with a thick clear. So that one of the things that's kind of fun with these media, you could put a color underneath, paint your thickness on top, and be able to see through some of that to what's underneath. Plus, layer on top of that washes of color, either opaque, wiping on and wiping off. So you can just have so much fun with these. So acrylic's really awesome that way. Plus it dries fairly quickly. So you could mix, so I'm mixing the two together here just to have a little more thickness, because it's this particular modeling paste is a little thin. So you just work through it. Have you ever done any baking? No? It's like creaming butter. So there, so it's nice and smooth and consistent now. And then you can say, okay, what if I want to draw my snake with that?
And you can paint over this too?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see, however you want to draw. Now, and as it sets up, so we're going to give it some time to set up. So you can do whatever drawing. And you can still, you know, paint and whatnot, but it's a little bit like sculpting in low relief, right? And it can be loosely suggested if you like, and then you're going to do more painting and, you know, detail on top. Or you could really lay your base where you're kind of creating that low relief sculpture, right? So you can have some areas where they pop up more, and other where you want to make it look like it's going in underneath. You know, you can have it be a lower relief, less texture. So maybe the snake's going, because I know you had this little bit of a wrap around kind of thing happening. My snake sideways, so you know. So now, as that sets up, you can start to work it a bit. It's a little bit soft still right now. I would suggest that we let it harden up a little more. But you can then come in with your smaller palette knife or the rubber stylus, right? So this is nice and flexible. And there's different types of rubber styluses. Some that give you a little more control in this shape, but this is kind of like, it's like a rubber paintbrush, eh? This type. So So as that sets up, you see how you could start to create texture. You know, imagine, find what kind of mark you could make to create those scales. You can also, once that's a little bit stiffer, you'll be able to push and pull this stuff around with your rubber stylus. It's just too wet right now, but as it dries, it'll get stiffer, and then you'll be able to work it and sculpt it a little bit. You could also try this palette knife to see what could you do with it. So it's kind of mark making, right? And then let that set up, and you might decide, ooh, what if I rake over that very lightly? What would that do? Not that heavy, lighter than what I just did, but I think it just needs time to set up a little bit. So it's something that it takes a little patience, you know, so that sometimes when I'm working on things like this, I might have more than one thing I'm doing, or a bigger canvas and I'm working on one area, or stop and sip some tea and wait for it to set up to the right amount. But you want to kind of keep tabs on it, keep testing, you know, where is it at right now, right? So let's see, what's the open time? Sometimes they tell you how long they stay wet. You can also add the retarder to this if you need more time. It's not telling me what the open time is. Open time just means like how long it'll stay soft and workable. So to try that again. Make texture. And it's starting to feel different. And I think, you know, just trying different things, different tools. How would you make something that looks snakeskin-like? I think I'm starting to get there. It's starting to look more that way. What do you think? So, and we could leave it like that, or we could, the other thing you can do is let it dry like that, and then you can sand it down too. So that there's a bit of sculpting you can do with sandpaper, or maybe just take the peaks off a little bit, right? And you might plan to have one part more smooth, like his face, right? And then you might want to shift to a palette knife that you can control the shape a little more, the smaller one. You see, you can do some pretty neat stuff with it. And once you see how the paint goes on top of that, so we would put like a glaze, wipe it back down so it goes down into the low parts. Kind of almost like, have you ever seen pottery that's done that way?
I think so.
And then you could also say, take the side of your paintbrush and graze with thick paint on top of the high parts, right? And you're going to pick up on the high parts and leave another color in below. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with it. And even the low texture that's back here is going to pick up paint and media in a different way. So it's really, can add a lot to a painting and just allow you to play with the whole effect. And it's a fast way to build up some texture, a little bit cheaper than, you know, building up texture with paint. And so this one is designed to use by itself underneath, either with gesso or by itself. And so it's the base layer. This one is designed to be mixed with your paint, right? So you generally wouldn't mix this with your paint, but I suppose you could, but the white in it is going to change the color, right, to a pastel. Where this will dry clear. So that's cool too, that you might consider how could you layer with clear or mixing in, right? And one of the things that's great about golden medias is the way they're designed, that a little bit of good quality paint goes a long way through this. So that, like, especially the golden paints, that they're so highly charged with pigment. And I mean, it's down to a science of how they disperse the pigment particles through this stuff, that it's a good idea to always even just use, a regular a medium to mix with the paint, because it makes your paint go further, and it ends up being cheaper. But you have to have a decent quality, and some of the ones you have, they're pretty good quality paints. So, and it doesn't matter, you can use different brands with them. They're all acrylic. So it's probably ideal to use the same brand together, but it's still the same stuff. So you can intermix, okay? So you kind of get the idea of how you could create something interesting, eh? And then there, now that it's set up a little more, you can drag over it. It holds its mark, but changes it slightly. So it's really, just experimenting with what angle yields what, and playing with the edge, like even just what happens depending on how you move your tool, right? So anyhow, I think I liked what I had before I dragged over it. There we go. So, and so you may want to try the heavy gel on its own too. Now the other thing I sometimes do, let me see, I might have some here. I think I do. To make this even thicker, you can add, what's it called, calcium carbonate or marble dust. So, and that it makes it even stiffer. And I think I have some here so that we could mix them in. And that way you could be able to sculpt a little more with your rubber tool and be able to get some of the shape you want even more. Okay?
Okay.
So anyway, fun. So now let's have you try that. And I'll show you an example. Let me get this off of here. So you wash up your tools with soap and water, or just wipe them on a cloth. So I didn't want to have them dry on there, so okay. Now there's a painting I did in another class years ago. It's not a great painting, but let's go get it. But it does show some of the different things you can do. So here we have this painting here. Like I said, it's not a good painting, but it does show texture. So some modeling paste was put underneath. So there's the rake that we talked about, a comb or rake in here too. Here, this modeling paste was a different brand, and it's more stiff. Can you feel that? It's really rough. So this was stippling with a brush done. Here it's put on with a palette knife. This was raked and then skimmed over with this side of the palette knife. That's the rake. Here we glued on papers, so that there's some tissue paper underneath. You see these? Wrinkled up tissue paper. Here we added pumice. You can feel that. Those would be rough, like pumice or sand, right? So you can see how it picks up the, when you go on top with the drier paint, it really picks up the color. We then put glue, like just dripped glue on a string. So there's a lot of ways you can make texture, right? So, yeah. So you're looking a little bit more. And you could think about, if I want to make a snake texture, you could even consider gluing on something that's that texture. Except that I think that you'd like to have this more free flow fun, right? So let's see what you can make with playing around a bit. Okay.